All right, folks, it's the June meeting of the Stage Hypnotist Mastermind. Super excited to have you here. Thank you for giving us your time. My special guest, our special guest, your special guest this month is none other than Brenda Kay. Brenda, how are you?
Woo, I'm great.
We're going to dig right into it. What did you do before you got into hypnotism? What was your life like before being a hypnotist?
You know, I actually got started in hypnosis after I dropped out of college.
Did you really?
Yeah, I didn't really know what I wanted to do with my life, so I went to college to become a graphic designer. And
Okay.
then when I decided I didn't want to do that with my life because I didn't want to sit behind a computer all day, whoops. Then I dropped out of college and I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do with my life. And so I was kind of at that point, like, please show me some direction, give me some purpose. Like, what's my purpose? What's my direction? Blah, blah, blah. And that's when I happened upon a hypnosis school that needed some guinea pigs to practice on. Had no idea what hypnosis was, but I was open to it. I said, what can this hypnosis do for me? And she said, can help you lose weight, stop smoking, sleep better, overcome fears and phobias, all the traditional things. And I said, well, that's all cool. I don't really need any of that. I said, can hypnosis help me figure out what I want to do with my life? She said, I don't know, but you could give it a shot. And so they paired me up with a student and I was terrified. I was honestly, it was like, what did I get myself into? Because at that point, the only thing I knew about hypnosis is what I had seen in the movies. And there was that movie Stir of Echoes that had just come out with Kevin Bacon, where he hypnotizes somebody at a party and unlocks something in their brain where they get haunted by ghosts. And I genuinely thought that that could happen to me. But I was at a point, I was like, I just need some freaking help. Like, I'm just going to see. And so it was my third hypnosis session in that I had my Oprah aha moment. Like, I'm imagining myself, well, in hypnosis on the top of a mountain, and I'm looking out over the Rocky Mountains because I was a big snowboarder at the time too. But I'm on the top of the Keystone Resort, looking over the mountains. The clouds part, the sun shines down, and I hear this, ah! And I'm like, what is that? And then I hear this voice saying, Brenda, this is what you need to do with your life. And it was the first time I had like a full body knowing that hypnosis is what I'm meant to do with my life. And it was such a profound moment that I knew that this is what I wanted to do. And in the subsequent sessions, I had such life-changing experiences that I found it a different hypnosis school, because the one that I went to or volunteered was really what I called airy fairy hypnosis. Like, and I wanted something more medical background, like something more legit, I thought. So I found a hypnosis school and I did that training. And then during that training, I was young. People were pegging me there. Oh, I bet you're going to do stage hypnosis. I said, there is no way in hell that I will ever get up in front of people and talk. No, not going to do it. Too shy. Didn't do it. Couldn't see myself doing it. But I just loved hypnosis. And with that, I knew that I needed to tell people about this. And being young, and Zach, you have overcome this obstacle very well. I was really young and people weren't taking me seriously. And I even had somebody say, aren't you too young to be a therapist? And I was like 21 to 23, can't really remember. Anyway, early 20s. And I told that person, I was so like taken back. I'm like, I thought I was too old not to know what I wanted to do with my life. But that was an obstacle for me. I was young and people were not taking me serious. And so I said, well, what if I could demonstrate my skills? How do I demonstrate my skills? A hypnosis show. But then there weren't really many stage hypnosis mentors back in the early 2000s. And so my trainer and we looked at some videos. Melissa Barnes was the one. We're talking about VHS tapes earlier before this call started. So hello, throwback. We got a VHS tape of Melissa Barnes doing a hypnosis show at a conference, at the NGH conference. And we kind of broke down her show structure. Okay, this is what she's doing and blah, blah, blah. And basically put together a show based on what she had done. And so my first hypnosis show was for my my hypnosis class and all of their friends and family. It was like at a National Guild meeting. So there were maybe like 25 people in the room. But when you hypnotize hypnotists, you can't really go wrong. So that's the long story of how I got started in hypnosis.
That's cool. That's awesome. So let's just keep going with that a little bit more. So you get into that thinking it's going to be a way to bring more attention to your consulting or clinical work. And then, I mean, it takes you in a whole other direction, right?
Well,
or should I say to a
yes.
different level of focus, maybe might be a more.
Right, it was a different level of focus. So I started doing the shows to promote my practice. That was the sole purpose. I want to show people the power of hypnosis in a fun and entertaining way to fill my private practice. But meanwhile, while I was also building my practice, I was also working a full-time job. And I had a part-time job. Like I felt like I was working 5 jobs at a time, but you know, in your early 20s, you could do that. But I was doing, because you just do whatever you have to do to get the bills paid, to get the stuff done, right? So it took a few years and I transitioned. I was able to transition my practice and doing the shows. So I was doing a part-time job and then like a part-time practice, and then I was doing shows. But also in the meantime, I was also using hypnosis on myself, and I was planting the seeds, right? Because when we learn about hypnosis, we learn you can reprogram your mind. And I was like, well, why don't I program my mind for the life that I want? And so I started giving myself hypnotic suggestions. And what I really wanted was this goes back to even my dream in high school. My dream in high school was to travel the world like a rock star. And I thought I had to be a groupie to do that. I was like, well, I'll just be a groupie and like go sleep with some bands and stuff. But yeah, that didn't work out for me. Thank God. I was like, how do I travel the world like a rock star? So going back a few years later, so I'm like, okay, what's my dream? I want to travel the world. I want to get paid to do what I love. I want to live like I'm on vacation. I want to, work less and make more, like all of those seeds planted in my garden, right? Just kind of outrageous things. Because how could you even logically make all of that happen? But the beautiful thing about the subconscious mind, it aligns everything, right? You plant those seeds, you nurture them, and then boom, it blew up in a cosmic meeting. I went to an NGH meeting, and somebody had known my name and they knew that I did hypnosis shows, and they said, oh, and actually my friend Nadine, I don't know if you guys know her, but we met at that conference, and we met a guy that said, oh, there's 2 young female stage hypnotists. You guys are like the unicorn of stage hypnosis, the unicorns, because there weren't a lot of young females doing it back in the day. And he said, oh, I'd like to talk to you about doing stage hypnosis. Turns out he was performing on cruise ships, and he said, have you guys ever thought about doing your shows on cruise ships? And I said, tell me more. He said, yeah. They pay you to get on the cruise, to do your show, and you get to see the world. I said, oh my God, that sounds like exactly what I've been asking for. Sign me up. Never even saw a cruise ship in real life. Never been on one, didn't know what to expect, but I knew for the second time that that's what I needed to do. And so I gave up, kind of trying to distill the story. I gave up my private practice. I gave up my apartment. I gave up everything to go do this, not knowing whether or not it would work out. So doing all of those stage shows, and I took some shitty ass gigs, if I can say that, just to get started. You know, I did the worst gigs just to get practice. But come on.
Worst gig. The worst gig was?
Oh my God, it's some crappy bars. Like crappy bars in the middle of like, at night after everybody's already drunk and nobody's paying attention. You're like, hey, everybody, I'm trying to do a show. And I don't think I ever even did the show. I think it was so bad it didn't even happen. I just threw in the towel. Yeah. But you know, and I remember also I did a show at another bar, and this is a lesson I will never forget. They had the only chairs that they had were high bar stools. and then like the bench on the front of the stage. So I had some people sitting like on the front of the stage, and then I had people sitting at the bar stools. Somebody fell face first off of the bar stool because there's no back on the chair, and like there's nowhere for them to balance. And I didn't even think that through until it happened. So thank God for insurance, but nobody even sued me because, you know, relaxed people bounce like babies. So, but I never used a bar stool again. Like I insisted that they had those chairs. But with every failed situation in a show, you learn what not to do next time.
Yeah.
But all of that just manifested in being in the right place at the right time and meeting that guy that got both Nadine and I on ships to make that dream come true, to live that dream life. And I did that solid for 13 years, full time, gave up everything, did that full time until COVID.
Let's drill deeper on that, okay? Because there's a lot of stage hypnotists out there who've never worked cruise ships and probably don't really understand what makes that marketplace and that work environment different from doing, you know, four-walling or college shows or corporate shows. Or like, what do you think are the most important factors or aspects that separate cruise ship work from the other types of stage shows that you've done as a stage hypnotist?
What sets it apart is, God, there's so much, but a lot of it's the venue. And here's the positive things about the venue. You are working in $1 million theaters. You get lighting techs, you get sound techs, you get an audience, a captive audience that is just built in for you. Like those are the amazing things. And okay, so those are the amazing things. The more difficult things, I think for a lot of people, is dealing with the demographic. And for hypnotists, they usually want you on longer cruises because they know you can do more than just your show. And so the longer the cruise, the older the crowd. And so your audience is generally like, your 40-year-olds are probably going to be your youngest person, or, you know, the youngest demographic. So you're dealing with people that are like 60 to death. You know, like, to be quite honest, like you're hypnotizing people from 60 to 90 some years old. And so you have to know how to work with that demographic, which that was scary for me, quite honestly, when I started, because I was used to high school kids, college kids, bar age people, you know, younger people that can fall on their face and bounce. If you let a 60 to 80-year-old fall face forward, they're breaking a hip.
There goes the hip. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So you have to learn safety, and also not to be scared. When I first started doing the shows and I was working with my mentor, and I said, I don't know what's going wrong, why I can't get people to volunteer. So he watched the show. He was like, Brenda, you're terrified. And they can feel it, they can sense it. And I was like, why would I be scared? And then I thought, oh yeah, I'm kind of scared of the old people. But then once that was brought to my awareness, I'm like, why am I scared? Like, I don't have to be scared. And then I picked out like all the good things. Here's the good thing about working with that demographic. They have a lifetime of experience to draw off of. So the things that they say and the things that they do in hypnosis are by far and away more exciting than a high school kid or a college kid. You know, to see an 80-year-old playing the air guitar is way more fun than a high school kid, right? And they do give way less fucks about anything. I love it. Yes, thanks, Natasha. And it's so fun. The other drawback, or the hard thing, is that your venue moves.
Yeah.
The ship will rock. And you have to be okay with that. And you have to learn how to navigate that, because you never know what the seas are going to do, you know, and if you're seasick, probably not the best venue for you. And like I said, I didn't know if I would be seasick or not, because I'd never been on the ocean on a ship, but I set my mind to it that my mantra, my self-hypnosis mantra was, I am one with the sea and the sea is one with me. Aww. And I always found it to be a fun, exciting ride when the seas got rough. So, and there's times where you're like, oh, like you're just moving across the stage. And then you also have to worry about how your people are going to stay balanced in the chairs when the seas are moving. So that's one thing. Also, when I started, you don't have a say of where you're going and for how long, because you just have to have an open schedule. It's not like, oh, I only want to sail in the Caribbean and I'm only available to sail these 2 months out of the year. If you're that picky, they won't work with you.
Right.
So you have to be open. And when I signed on, first got on the ship, they said, you could be gone for 3 weeks or 3 months. We just don't know.
Wow.
We're going to see how you do. And so I think I was originally out for, I think it was about 6 or 8 weeks. And then I was home for a month and then another month. And I'm like, am I ever going to go back? And then they're like, okay, Brenda, you can come back. But I never knew my schedule. So you have to be really flexible. But there was times, I remember one time they sent me out for 2 weeks and I ended up being there 3.5 months.
Really?
Like, they kept extending my end date. They're like, we don't know when we're going to send you home. And I'm like, what do you mean? So if you've got a family or if you've got responsibilities or you've got obligations, that can be hard.
Yeah.
And you miss a lot of birthdays. You miss a lot of significant events. I've missed, sadly, a lot of friends' funerals, and I've lost a lot of friendships over it because there's people in your life that can't deal with you being gone. And so that's something that you have to be aware of and be okay with.
Yeah.
And also the other thing is you really have to, I think, love people, because it's not like you go and you do your show and then you get to go home. You're with these people for a week or 2 weeks. And once you do your show, they know you and they'll recognize you all around the ship. And Grant, you probably know this is true. Once you've done your show, they're like, you go to the buffet and people are like, oh, there's the hypnotist. And it's like, or they're just talking and like they want to talk to you, but they don't know what to say. And they'll just say the most awkward stuff, and it's like you become like a mini celebrity. Everybody wants to talk to you and they want to ask you the same 10 questions that you've been asked 1,000 times already. And you have to answer it like it's the first time, because these people don't know that thousands of people have asked you the same questions. So you better love what you do and you better love hypnosis if you're going to be out and about on the ship, because you belong to the crowd once you do your show.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that with us. Hey, I want to open it up to everybody else. Does anyone else have, I mean, I have like 20 more questions, but it's not all about me. Any of you have questions that you want to send Brenda's way? Just go ahead and unmute yourself and fire it off.
Hey, Brenda, are you able to, in that environment, schedule other shows?
As far
because
as
you don't know your schedule.
Oh, that's a good question, Colin. Yeah, like you could think, oh, I could do a show a month from now, but then if you get extended, you can't, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and you kind of have to choose. And it wasn't until probably even after I'd been doing it for 10 years or so, where I actually told them, no, I'm not available. But then when you tell them no, they're like, oh. But and there's been vacations that I've planned that I had to give up because, you know, I'm like, okay, I'm going to book this vacation for 6 months out. And then all of a sudden they're like, hey, Bren, we need you to work this week. And you're like, oh, I don't want to say no.
For your 13 years, Brenda, did you pretty much, you know, sort of to dig deeper on Colin's question, did you pretty much not do anything but cruise shows for that whole period of time?
Yep.
Wow.
Solid.
Wow.
Yeah. And at one point I was able to get my ideal schedule. So what you can do after you've been established as an act and an act that they like and an act that they want to come back, you can say, here's my availability. So, and I said, you know, what I would really love to do is work 2 weeks on and 2 weeks off. So I'm on the ship for 2 weeks, at home for 2 weeks. And it just so happened there was another comedian that he wanted that same schedule. And I was on this ship already for a while. And once you get to know the people on board, the cruise directors, the hotel directors, which are kind of like your bosses on board, they're the ones that write the review and can ask for you back or not. So I got in good with them, and so I said, this is what I want to do. And I told my agent told the main office called the ship, and they said, would you be okay doing this? So there's a whole like little chain of events. And they said, yeah. So I went and I kind of traded spots with this comedian. So we were in the same officer cabin, which we get. So I would just leave my stuff under the bed when I was gone for 2 weeks. And then when I was there, he left his stuff under the bed. So it's like we were roommates. So you would always go back to that same room. You were on the same ship. Like everything was pretty consistent. And that happened for like a year. And then management changed. And so then I couldn't do that anymore. But you can put out your schedule and they'll sometimes try to accommodate it, but it doesn't always happen like that. But with that, yeah, I couldn't plan anything on land. So I just didn't. So I just used the time at home to just be at home. But I did, I guess towards the end too, because I did get married and I was like, okay, I should probably stay home a little bit more with my husband and my puppy. And so I tried to open an office again. Well, so I rented a space and I was trying to build up the practice, but it was really hard for me to build that practice when I was away and everything was inconsistent. And then I gave that office up in COVID and then converted everything to online. So yeah.
Cool. What else? Anyone else got any other questions?
Question. Do you have any issues with language barriers or any funny stories involving miscommunication because, international audiences?
Chris, you broke up a little bit on that. Say it one more time.
Oh, I'm sorry about that. International misunderstandings because you're doing it in different languages or the audience is so diverse.
Yeah, and that is a problem because you're dealing with people from all over the world. And typically, and at the start of my career, they said, or I was told, we don't really use hypnotists in Europe because there's so many different languages. But for some reason, they're like, well, let's just see how this works. And Grant actually has a better story about this than I do. But yeah, so I've had people and I've had the experience where I've had to say, in order to be hypnotized, you have to be able to understand me. And then I even said, you have to be able to understand English, because then people come up on stage and I do this whole bit about how in order to be hypnotized, you need to follow my simple instructions. And now give me a verbal yes, if you agree. And I'm pointing, yes, yes. And then this person's just staring at me. And I'm like, do I have permission to hypnotize you? And they're like they don't understand me. And I'm like, how did you even get up here if you don't understand me? And then I'm like, do you speak English? And they were like, so I just sent them back to their seat. But what I found too is if English isn't your first language, it's harder to get hypnotized because you're spending too much time translating the language. And so I'll tell people that, I don't necessarily say that during the show, but when I break it down in a seminar, when I kind of debrief hypnosis, I explain that because people ask, well, why didn't it work for me? And that's one of the biggest reasons. Yeah. So yeah, the language barrier is hard, and working in Europe is pretty difficult. Grant, do you want to share your story?
Yeah, it was my first ever cruise contract, so I was pleased with myself. But it was one of those. It was like a perfect storm of errors. I remember the cruise director pulling me to one side, kind of saying, "I don't really like hypnotists, but we've been told to give you a try." And it was the first time that the ship had docked in Hamburg, and the cruise directors come to me the night before the show and asked me if I spoke any other languages apart from English, and I'm like, "No, just English badly." And it's like 80% of the passengers are retired Germans. And every single volunteer that came up on stage for the first show was like, "Sprechen Sie Deutsch? Sprechen Sie Deutsch? Sprechen Sie Deutsch?" And then Simone Dares come up, and I think it was it wasn't a Norwegian actually. Simone Dares come up, and she's gone, "Oh, I'll translate for you." She was the only one that kind of half went under, so all of her translation skills have gone, and then every single person had no idea what I was saying. And it got so awkward, and you know what the theatres are like, they're massive, the production is massive. And I just remember a point of hearing somebody in the audience going, "This is awkward." And I thought, there's an English speaker in the audience, why are you not on the stage? And I literally wanted the stage to just swallow me up whole, because they were paying me good money to be there as well. And it was just like, wow, that was awful. Luckily the second show was a bit better, but yeah, that was hard work.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
And Grant, you brought up a point too. If the cruise director doesn't like you, they don't make it easy on you. And they could put you at the worst time and just give you like, and just make it all go bad. And it's not necessarily a reflection on you. It's just kind of the situation. And ultimately, like, they, at the end of the cruise, they have to write their little review like, "Oh, well, he couldn't get anybody hypnotized, or the audience didn't react." Okay, but did you specify that 80% of them didn't speak English? Like, they could skew it so that you don't get booked on that ship again. I've had cruise directors that just didn't like me because I was a girl or whatever, or a hypnotist, and they're like, "I don't want her back on my ship." Okay. Yeah.
I got billed to do the night before disembarkation once as well. So that was the night before everybody leaves the ship.
And was it like at 10:30 at night?
Oh, exactly.
Yeah,
And he kept
the
referring to me as
worst.
being Grant Sanders.
Oh yeah.
Hey,
I've been called the memorizing Brenda Kay.
Brenda, I got a little bit of time left, and I got to move us to our mastermind portion. But there's
Okay.
one other thing that I really want, and I know we haven't known each other that long, but I hope you know that my heart's in the right place when I do this. But I want to have a candid conversation about women in our profession, and what is it going to take? Like, when I think about, like, so and then when I say these names, I don't know them all personally, but I've at least met them, right? So Nadine and
Mhm.
you, Catherine Hickland, Amy Charlo, Amy Colford's new. I can think of like, maybe, I don't think I can cover my two hands, right? Deanna Nunez, like, maybe if I get lucky, I can cover my two hands with female stage hypnotists who are currently, if we want to rig it, we can go back to Pat Collins, right? Which she's been on for a while. Like,
Right.
what is it going to take to get more women performing in this profession, in your opinion?
Gosh, I don't know. I don't know what it's going to take.
Let me ask you a different question, and you can come back
Mhm.
to that one if you want, the first one. How many collegial relationships with other female stage hypnotists do you have? Do you hang out with each other? Do you check in with each other? Do you talk with each other? Like, these people here, Doug and I were on the phone the other day, and Grant and I catch up on Facebook Messenger once in a while. And like, I've got some of that going on, right? But I'm wondering, like, is there a sense of like, we really need to help each other and support each other in your cohort, kind of? Or tell me more about that.
I've always been collaborative, and I want to be inclusive. And I'm really good friends with Nadine. Like, we got started at the same time, and so we've really been a big support to each other. Deanna reached out to me, and we built a great relationship. And there's others. Those are the two that have the best relationship. And then there's others that are just kind of there. And I don't know if there's some, I guess, a girl thing of like competitive or cattiness, or I don't know if that's what it is.
And I want to be clear. I'm not trying to, I don't think there's that. I literally don't know anything about it, because I talk to women performers so rarely. But
Yeah.
to me, I'm completely comfortable saying, I think it's pretty safe to say that this is still pretty much a good old boys network. And I just don't see how in 2022 that needs to be the case. And so I'm like, so what do we do about that? Like, how do we encourage like more women to do what you're doing? I'm just curious about it. Like the barriers for men are like, if they're not non-existent, they're awfully low.
Mhm,
Right. And I'm like,
mhm.
so, okay, I don't worry about guys getting into the profession. We know they can do that. I'm like, well, why not balance it out more? Like, why not see what more and more women could bring to the table in terms of the creativity and the craft? And I'm really curious about that. Yeah.
Because and I really feel, and I mean no disrespect to you guys, I really think women have an advantage in this field
Tell me more about that.
because when women are naturally like, I'm going to take care of you, like we're more inviting, when you think of, from a female perspective, when I think of a stage hypnotist, I think of the creepy middle-aged man with the facial hair that just has, I've got the power and I'm gonna make you do things like that you don't want to do, right? No disrespect to you guys, especially those with facial hair. But like that's a stereotypical standard. And I think when a woman comes on stage, it's like, hey, let's have fun. I'm going to take care of you. Or, or I guess I don't know. I think we're more welcoming.
Well, there is a stereotype that's going around forever that women are by nature more nurturing. And so if you think
Mhm.
about like creating rapport, right? Like it would make sense that that would be an asset if you feel you
Yeah.
fall into that stereotype, right?
Yeah.
You're like, yeah, I'm pretty good. Like I can totally get that. I can see that. Yeah. Yeah.
And I think, women, we can put out the power in a more subtle way, right? That's not like, I've got the power, I'm gonna make you do these things. It's
Right.
like,
Right.
I'm gonna, like, I think people are getting used to more powerful women, if you will, like
Yeah.
the female performers, like
Yeah.
the rock stars, like the
Yeah.
lead women in the bands.
Yeah.
And I think it's becoming more widely accepted. I honestly don't know why more women aren't doing it. That would be a really good question to throw out there.
Well, let's come back to it at some point. I think it's a conversation that's worth continuing. And
Mhm.
I think that more diversity in our profession just makes our profession better. And I think
Mhm.
that that would just be cool to see, because again, I think there are like if you look at, and this is sort of a thing I come back to. So I know this is my bias, but I've talked time and time again about the idea that everyone's got a niche, right? And so like if you work to your niche, you get to be happy and make money and you're bringing value to that niche, right? So I
Mhm.
just think like having every kind of performer we can have just makes the profession that much stronger. Like, so
Mhm.
we service all those niches, and that's pretty a cool thing to me. So, hey, thank you for sharing with us. You were really fun. It was so nice to hear you talk about your experience. Very cool. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure.